The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time in as many cycles, and Admiral Vextar of the Hegemony Fleet found himself staring at the same impossible data streams that had baffled the greatest minds in known space. The holographic display before the assembled delegates showed a three-dimensional map of the Kepler nexus, where massive ion storms had been raging for the past solar rotation. These storms were not ordinary space weather, they were Category 9 phenomena that could strip shields from capital ships in minutes and fry navigation systems across entire sectors. What made the current situation unprecedented was not the storms themselves, but what had been observed passing through them. Human vessels. Multiple confirmed sightings of Terran ships moving through the ion tempests as if they were nothing more than gentle cosmic breezes. The storms, which had forced every known spacefaring civilization to avoid the region entirely, seemed to part before human ships like water around a stone, undisturbed and undiminished. The energy readings are consistent across all monitoring stations, reported Dr. Seth Cree, the Council's chief xenophysicist, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. Human vessels enter the storm systems, traverse them completely, and exit on the far side. The storms show no measurable decrease in intensity, no dispersion patterns, nothing. It's as if the ships simply don't exist in the same dimensional space as the ion phenomena. Vextar's mandibles clicked in frustration. His people, the Korthani, had mastered stellar engineering and could move planets when necessary, but they had learned to give ion storms a berth of at least 10 light-hours. The idea that any species could simply ignore such cosmic fury challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and survival. "Have we attempted direct communication with the human vessels?" asked Counselor Ramoth of the Ethereal Collective, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her species' emotional state as deeply troubled. "Multiple attempts across all standard frequencies," Vextar replied. "The humans respond normally to hails outside the storm systems, but once they enter ion storm territory, all our communications experience severe interference. Interestingly, their own transmissions continue unimpeded. We can monitor their ship-to-ship communications clearly, even deep within the storms." This last detail had perhaps unsettled the Council more than anything else. Not only were humans unaffected by the storms, but their technology seemed to operate on principles that allowed normal function in conditions that would cripple any other known civilization's equipment. The central hologram shifted to show recorded footage from the Hegemony observation post at Kepler 7. The image quality suffered from the massive electromagnetic interference generated by the storms, but the outline of a human cargo vessel could be clearly seen entering what appeared to be the heart of a particularly violent ion tempest. The ship's running lights remained steady, its course unwavering, as it disappeared into the roiling mass of charged particles and electromagnetic chaos. 12 hours later, the same vessel emerged on the opposite side of the storm system, its hull integrity apparently uncompromised, its energy signatures normal. During its passage, the storm had maintained its full intensity, continuing to generate readings that would have been lethal to any other known spacecraft. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Zethkree continued, manipulating the display to highlight energy distribution patterns. "If humans can traverse ion storms without affecting them, it suggests their technology operates on principles we don't understand. More concerning, if they can do this routinely, it gives them access to regions of space that remain completely inaccessible to the rest of us." Vextar had been thinking along similar lines. Ion storms were one of the few truly universal hazards in space travel. They occurred naturally in stellar formation regions, around certain types of binary stars, and in the aftermath of supernovas. They also formed barriers that had shaped galactic politics for millennia. Trade routes curved around them, territorial boundaries respected them, and several ongoing conflicts had been frozen in place because key strategic systems lay on the far sides of permanent storm fronts. If humans could ignore these barriers entirely, the entire balance of galactic civilization would shift. They could establish trade routes through regions others couldn't access, position military assets in areas thought permanently inaccessible, and potentially control choke points that had never before been considered strategically relevant. "We need to understand their methodology," declared Counselor Thane of the Silicon Collective, his crystalline structure resonating with decisive harmonics. "This cannot be allowed to remain a human monopoly. The strategic implications alone justify immediate investigation." But Vextar had been studying human behavior patterns since their first contact with the galactic community, and he suspected the answer would not be found in their technology alone. Humans had consistently demonstrated capabilities that seemed to violate established understanding, but always in ways that suggested the difference lay not in their equipment, but in their approach to fundamental problems. The first reports had begun filtering in almost 6 months ago. Human commercial vessels had been spotted in the Vorthan system, which had been considered unreachable for the past 3 centuries due to a massive ion storm complex that surrounded it completely. The storms were permanent features, fed by the interaction between 3 different stellar wind patterns and a particularly dense nebular region. Multiple civilizations had attempted to establish mining operations in Vorthan over the millennia, as geological surveys indicated enormous deposits of rare elements, but the ion storms made approach impossible. Then, human cargo ships had begun arriving regularly, delivering supplies to what appeared to be a thriving mining operation on Vorthan Prime. When questioned, human officials had been perfectly forthcoming about their presence, expressing mild surprise that other species found the route challenging. They offered to share navigation data, but the information made no sense to xenotechnology experts. The human chart showed direct routes through the storm systems, with notations about optimal passage windows and resonance frequencies that seemed to have no correlation with standard ion storm behavior patterns. When other species attempted to follow human routes using their own vessels, they encountered the same lethal interference that had always made such passages impossible. A joint scientific expedition had been organized, with ships from 7 different civilizations attempting to follow a human convoy through a relatively minor storm system in the Arcturus region. The human vessels had proceeded normally, but every other ship in the expedition had been forced to abort after experiencing immediate shield failures and navigation system overloads. The humans had offered assistance, but their rescue protocols proved as mysterious as their navigation methods. The most disturbing aspect, Dr. Zethkri was saying, calling Vextar's attention back to the briefing, is that we've detected no unusual technology aboard human vessels. Standard sensor sweeps reveal propulsion systems, navigation arrays, and defensive measures that fall well within established technological parameters. Nothing exotic, nothing that should theoretically allow for storm passage. This observation had led to increasingly frustrated attempts to understand the human advantage. Several governments had offered substantial compensation for detailed technical specifications of human storm navigation systems. The humans had been cooperative, providing complete engineering schematics and operational procedures. The information was comprehensive and, apparently, completely accurate. It was also completely useless to anyone except humans. Other species' attempts to implement human navigation protocols resulted in system failures, energy feedback loops, and, in several cases, complete loss of vessels with all hands. The human procedures, when followed precisely, seemed to actively interfere with non-human technology. It was as if the 2 approaches to space travel operated according to different fundamental principles. Have we considered the possibility, Counselor Ramoth asked quietly, that humans relate to space itself differently than we do? The question hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere like a challenge to everything the assembled delegates thought they understood about physics. Different species had varying approaches to faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation, and stellar engineering, but the basic principles of space, time, and matter were considered universal constants. The idea that perception or consciousness might affect interaction with fundamental forces was relegated to fringe philosophical discussions, not practical engineering. Yet the evidence continued to accumulate. Human ships moved through ion storms as if the storms didn't exist, but the storms remained unaffected by their passage. It wasn't that humans had found a way to neutralize or avoid the storms, they seemed to exist in a state where the storms simply didn't apply to them. Vextar activated his personal communication array and sent a priority message to Captain Jorak Hendricks of the human cargo vessel Resilient Trader, currently en route through the Kepler Nexus storm system. The reply came back within minutes, despite the fact that standard physics suggested communication through such interference should be impossible. Admiral Vextar, good to hear from you again. We're about halfway through the storm complex now. Beautiful light show out here, though I suppose you can't see it from your monitoring station. Is there something I can help you with? The casual tone was typical of human responses to queries about their storm navigation abilities. They never seemed to understand why other species found their capabilities remarkable, and their explanations invariably failed to convey useful information. Captain Hendricks, Vexstar transmitted back, "We remain fascinated by your ability to traverse ion storms. Would it be possible for you to describe what you're experiencing during passage?" There was a brief pause before the response arrived. "Well, it's certainly energetic out here. Lots of charged particles, electromagnetic flux, the usual storm phenomena. The ship handles it fine, though. Standard procedure is to maintain steady course and speed, keep power distribution balanced, and trust your navigation systems. Nothing too complicated." Vexstar shared a look with Dr. Zethkry. This was exactly the type of response they had come to expect from humans. Technically accurate, completely unhelpful, and delivered with the assumption that anyone else would naturally be able to do the same thing. "Are you taking any special precautions?" Vexstar pressed. "Any modifications to your shields or navigation arrays?" "Negative, Admiral. This is a standard cargo run using standard equipment. The Resilient Trader is about as basic as human vessels get. No special modifications, no exotic technology. Just a reliable ship with a competent crew." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in thoughtful silence. Outside the observation windows, the Kepler Nexus storms continued their violent dance, beautiful and deadly, while somewhere within their depths, a human cargo ship continued its routine journey as if traveling through empty space. Dr. Zethkry manipulated her instruments, displaying real-time sensor data from the storm system. The energy readings were staggering, well beyond anything that should allow for safe passage. Yet there, buried in the electromagnetic chaos, was the steady signature of the Resilient Trader, proceeding calmly through conditions that would destroy any other known spacecraft. "The question," Vexstar said finally, "is not what technology humans are using. The question is why reality seems to operate differently for them than it does for the rest of us." It was a statement that challenged fundamental assumptions about the universe itself, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to avoid the conclusion. Humans didn't seem to have better technology for dealing with ion storms. They appeared to exist in a state where ion storms simply weren't the same kind of problem for them that they were for everyone else. The implications were staggering, not just strategically, but philosophically. If consciousness or perception could affect interaction with fundamental forces, it suggested that the universe was far stranger and more malleable than anyone had imagined. It also suggested that humans had somehow discovered or developed a way of being that granted them capabilities others couldn't replicate, regardless of technological advancement. As the council session continued into the night cycle, the delegates found themselves grappling not just with a technological mystery, but with the possibility that they had fundamentally misunderstood the relationship between consciousness and reality. Somewhere out in the storm-racked depths of space, human ships continued their impossible journeys, carrying with them questions that might reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of existence itself. Captain Sarachan stood on the bridge of the research vessel Indomitable Will, watching the swirling chaos of the Magellan storm complex grow larger in the forward viewports. Beside her, Ambassador Kethvor of the Vegan Trade Confederation fidgeted with his environmental suit controls, clearly uncomfortable despite the diplomatic immunity that had secured his passage aboard a human vessel. "Captain Chen," Kethvor said, his translated voice carrying undertones of barely controlled anxiety, "I must express my continued concern about this demonstration. The Magellan complex is rated as a Category 10 ion storm. Our best theoretical models suggest that passage would require energy shielding beyond the capability of any known civilization." Sarah smiled, keeping her attention focused on the navigation displays. "I understand your concern, Ambassador. The storm readings are certainly impressive. But I think you'll find the experience less dramatic than you're expecting." This diplomatic mission had been arranged after months of increasingly urgent requests from various galactic governments for a direct demonstration of human storm navigation capabilities. The scientific community had reached a state of frustrated bewilderment, unable to explain observations that seemed to violate fundamental principles of physics and engineering. Political leaders worried about the strategic implications of human access to previously unreachable regions of space. The solution had been this joint mission: human crew, mixed diplomatic observers, and comprehensive sensor arrays from a dozen different civilizations, all designed to finally understand how humans accomplished the impossible. The Magellan Complex had been chosen specifically because it was among the most violent and well-studied storm systems in known space, with detailed observations stretching back over 2,000 years.
Beginning approach sequence, announced Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from the navigation station. Storm perimeter in approximately 40 minutes at current velocity.
Kethvor activated his personal recording device, checking connections to the various monitoring systems that filled half the bridge with unfamiliar alien technology. Representatives from the Silicon Collective, the Ethereal Assembly, and the Hegemony Fleet had insisted on bringing their own instruments, determined to capture whatever phenomenon allowed humans to traverse ion storms.
"Captain," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the mission's chief physicist, "all human systems show normal operational parameters. Storm intensity continues to increase as expected, but our equipment remains unaffected by the mounting electromagnetic interference."
This was already a source of fascination for the alien observers. Their own instruments were experiencing increasing difficulty as the ship approached the storm perimeter, requiring constant recalibration to maintain accurate readings. Meanwhile, human sensors and navigation systems operated with perfect clarity, as if the mounting energy chaos simply didn't exist. "How is this possible?" asked Counselor Zara of the Ethereal Assembly, her voice resonating with harmonic frequencies that indicated deep confusion. "Our quantum sensors are designed to operate in extreme environments, yet they're already showing significant degradation."
"Your equipment appears completely unaffected." Sarah exchanged a glance with Dr. Tanaka before responding.
"Our technology is designed with ion storm transit in mind, Counselor.
Standard human engineering practices take electromagnetic interference into account as a normal operational parameter."
It was the same type of answer humans always gave, technically accurate but somehow missing the essential point. What the alien observers didn't understand, and what humans found difficult to explain, was that the difference lay not in the technology itself, but in the fundamental approach to existence that informed human engineering.
The concept that had begun to emerge from Earth's philosophers and engineers was revolutionary in its simplicity.
Humans had learned, through centuries of conflict and survival, that external circumstances could only affect those who remained internally divided. A person who had achieved complete mastery over their own weaknesses, fears, and limitations became effectively immune to external destruction because there was nothing left in them for external forces to act upon. This principle, when applied to technology and space travel, manifested as engineering approaches that assumed harmony rather than conflict with natural forces. Where other species built shields to resist ion storms, humans built systems that achieved resonance with them. Where others saw chaotic energy that needed to be deflected or neutralized, humans recognized patterns that could be harmonized with rather than fought against.
"Storm perimeter contact in 60 seconds, Rodriguez announced.
Through the viewports, the first tendrils of charged particles began to dance across the ship's hull, creating brilliant displays of aurora-like light. The alien monitoring equipment immediately began registering alarm conditions. Energy readings spiked beyond safe parameters, electromagnetic interference reached levels that should have disabled all electronic systems, and the theoretical models predicted imminent catastrophic failure for any vessel attempting passage. Yet the Indomitable will continued its steady approach, its human crew calmly monitoring systems that showed no signs of distress. The ship's shields remained at minimal power, its engines operated at standard efficiency, and its navigation systems maintained perfect accuracy despite electromagnetic chaos that should have rendered them completely useless. "Fascinating," whispered Dr. Krillnock of the Silicon Collective, his crystalline form flickering with rapid data processing patterns. "The energy differential between predicted and actual system stress is beyond our theoretical framework. Your ship should be experiencing catastrophic overloads across all primary systems." "The interesting thing about predictions," Sarah replied mildly, "is that they're only as good as the assumptions they're based on. If your fundamental assumptions about how matter and energy interact are incomplete, your predictions will be consistently wrong." This was the heart of the mystery that had baffled galactic civilization. Humans operated from a completely different set of fundamental assumptions about reality, assumptions that allowed them to achieve results that seemed impossible to everyone else. These assumptions weren't based on superior technology or exotic physics, but on a philosophical understanding of existence that had practical applications beyond anything imagined by other species. The ship crossed the storm perimeter, and the bridge was immediately bathed in the ethereal glow of ionized particles streaming past the viewports. The energy displays from alien monitoring systems went completely chaotic, registering readings that exceeded their maximum parameters. Emergency alarms began sounding from multiple pieces of equipment as observers struggled to maintain any kind of coherent data collection. Meanwhile, the human crew continued their normal duties as if nothing unusual was happening. The ship's computer announced routine status updates, navigation proceeded according to plan, and the only sign they had entered a Category 10 ion storm was the beautiful light show visible outside.
"This is impossible," Kethvor said, staring at his instruments in bewilderment.
"According to every theoretical model we have, this ship should have been destroyed the moment we entered the storm field. The energy levels alone should have overloaded your power systems and caused complete structural failure."
Dr. Tanaka looked up from her console, where she was recording data that would later revolutionize human understanding of storm dynamics. "Ambassador, what if I told you that the secret isn't in resisting the storm, but in becoming something the storm cannot affect?"
The question hung in the bridge's charged atmosphere like a koan designed to challenge fundamental assumptions about existence. Kethvor's instruments showed energy levels that should have been lethal, electromagnetic interference that should have disabled all technology, and radiation doses that should have killed every living thing aboard the ship. Yet everyone remained perfectly safe, the technology functioned normally, and the ship continued its journey as if traveling through empty space.
"I don't understand," Kethvor admitted. "How can you become something that energy cannot affect? Matter is matter. Energy is energy.
The interactions are governed by fundamental laws that don't change based on attitude or philosophy."
"Are they?" Sarah asked quietly.
"Or have we discovered that consciousness itself is a fundamental force, one that can determine how other forces affect it?" This was the revolutionary concept that human science and philosophy had begun to explore in earnest. The idea that consciousness wasn't merely an emergent property of complex neural networks, but a basic aspect of reality that could influence physical interactions. A consciousness that had achieved complete internal harmony, that had eliminated all internal conflicts and weaknesses, seemed to exist in a state where external conflicts simply couldn't establish a foothold. The principle manifested in multiple ways throughout human achievement. Human warriors who had mastered themselves completely became nearly invincible in battle, not because they were stronger or faster than their enemies, but because they existed in a state where defeat was no longer a possibility. Human engineers who achieved similar mastery created technology that worked in harmony with natural forces rather than fighting against them. Applied to space travel, this understanding led to ship designs and navigation techniques that achieved resonance with ion storms rather than resistance to them. The storms weren't seen as obstacles to be overcome, but as natural phenomena to be understood and harmonized with. A ship operated by a crew that had eliminated their own internal conflicts could pass through external conflicts unaffected. "Look at your readings now," Dr. Tanaka suggested, pointing to Kethvor's instruments. "What do you see?" Kethvor checked his displays, frowning at the impossible data they showed. "The energy levels are higher than ever. We're now in the heart of the storm, experiencing particle bombardment that should be stripping your hull plating. But your ship's systems show absolutely no stress. It's as if the storm isn't affecting you at all." "Exactly," Sarah said. "We're not avoiding the storm or resisting it. We're existing in a state where the storm simply cannot touch us. The energy is there, the particles are real, the electromagnetic chaos is genuine. But we've achieved a way of being that makes us immune to their destructive effects." The concept was almost impossible for non-human consciousness to grasp because it challenged everything they understood about the relationship between mind and matter. Other species had developed incredible technologies, mastered energy manipulation on stellar scales, and achieved computational capabilities beyond human imagination. But they had never considered that consciousness itself might be a fundamental force capable of determining how other forces affected it. Humans had discovered this principle through necessity. Earth's history was a catalogue of conflicts, challenges, and disasters that had forced successive generations to either master themselves completely or be destroyed by external circumstances. Those who achieved true mastery survived and passed on their understanding. Those who remained internally divided were eliminated by the unforgiving pressures of natural selection. The result was a species that had learned, at a fundamental level, that external strength meant nothing without internal mastery. A human who had conquered their own weaknesses, fears, and limitations became functionally invincible because there was nothing left in them for external forces to work with.
They existed in a state of internal harmony that external chaos simply couldn't disrupt. "We're approaching the storm's center," Rodriguez announced.
Maximum intensity expected in approximately 15 minutes. The alien observers prepared for readings that would exceed even their expanded parameters, while the human crew continued their normal routines with the calm confidence of those who understood that no external force could touch what had achieved perfect internal balance. Outside the viewports, the storm raged with fury that could shatter planets, while inside the ship, humans demonstrated that mastery of self was the key to mastery of everything else. The man who destroys his weak self, they had learned, can never be destroyed by others, no matter what form that destruction might take. The universe was beginning to reveal its deepest secret, that consciousness and reality were partners in an eternal dance, and those who learned the steps could move through existence itself as easily as walking through a gentle breeze. 3 months after the Magellan demonstration, the Galactic Institute for Advanced Studies convened an unprecedented symposium on what had become known as the human consciousness paradox. Representatives from 47 different civilizations gathered at the neutral research station Concordia Prime, bringing with them the accumulated wisdom of species that had mastered faster than light travel, stellar engineering, and computational systems approaching artificial godhood. Yet they came seeking to understand something that seemed to belong more in the realm of ancient philosophy than modern science: how human consciousness appeared to influence physical reality in ways that violated everything they thought they knew about the universe. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped to the central podium, carrying with her the responsibility of explaining the unexplainable. As humanity's leading expert on what Earth's scientists had termed consciousness-matter interaction theory, she had spent years developing frameworks that might help other species understand capabilities that humans themselves were only beginning to comprehend systematically. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her words automatically translated into dozens of different languages and communication modalities, "what we're discussing today challenges the fundamental assumption that consciousness is merely an observer of physical reality, rather than an active participant in determining how that reality manifests." The assembled delegates represented some of the most advanced minds in the galaxy. The ethereal collective had achieved technological transcendence, existing as pure information in quantum substrates. The Silicon Collective had merged biological and mechanical evolution to create crystalline forms capable of processing information at speeds approaching light itself. The Hegemony Fleet commanded energy manipulation technologies that could reshape solar systems. None of them could explain how human cargo ships routinely travel through ion storms that would destroy their most advanced vessels. "The key insight," Dr. Vasquez continued, "emerges from humanity's unique evolutionary history. Earth was an unusually hostile environment that repeatedly forced our species to adapt or die. More importantly, it was an environment where survival depended not just on external tools or technologies, but on achieving perfect internal mastery." She activated the central holographic display, showing historical data from Earth's development. War, natural disasters, resource competition, climate changes, and social upheavals had created selection pressures unlike anything experienced by most galactic civilizations. Other species had typically achieved stable planetary environments early in their development, allowing them to focus on external technological advancement. Humans had been forced to develop internal technologies, psychological mastery, emotional regulation, the ability to maintain perfect function under impossible stresses. They had learned that external circumstances could only destroy those who remained internally divided, and that complete self-mastery provided a form of invulnerability that no external technology could match. "Consider the principle that has emerged from our research," Dr. Vasquez said, manipulating the display to show consciousness-matter interaction models. "A being that has achieved complete internal harmony, that has eliminated all internal conflicts and contradictions, exists in a state where external conflicts simply cannot find purchase.
This isn't metaphysical speculation, it's measurable physics. The assembled scientists stirred uncomfortably.
Dr. Kethman of the Vegan Confederation activated his communication array. Dr. Vasquez, what you're describing sounds like consciousness directly affecting matter and energy.
This violates causality as we understand it. Thoughts cannot change the fundamental properties of charged particles or electromagnetic fields. Can't they?
Dr. Vasquez replied, calling up data from the Magellan demonstration.
Every measurement we've taken suggests that human consciousness does exactly that.
Not by changing the particles themselves, but by existing in a state where those particles simply don't apply to them the same way they apply to everything else. The quantum physicist Dr. Zethros of the Ethereal Collective manifested a localized avatar to participate more directly in the discussion.
The implications are staggering.
If consciousness can determine how physical forces affect it, then reality itself is far more malleable than we've assumed. It suggests that the universe responds to internal states rather than external technologies. This was precisely the conclusion that had emerged from months of intensive study following the storm passage demonstrations. Human ships didn't carry exotic technology or energy shields beyond the capability of other civilizations.
They were operated by crews that had achieved a state of consciousness where external chaos simply couldn't disrupt their internal harmony. The principle had applications far beyond space travel.
Human diplomatic missions had begun demonstrating similar capabilities in other areas. Human negotiators could walk into situations of extreme political tension and somehow exist in a space where that tension didn't affect them. They weren't taking sides or imposing solutions, they were maintaining a state of perfect internal balance that external conflicts couldn't disturb. Human engineers were designing systems that achieved harmony with natural forces rather than fighting against them.
Human artists were creating works that seemed to tap directly into fundamental patterns of existence.
Human philosophers were developing understanding that suggested consciousness itself might be the most powerful force in the universe, capable of determining how all other forces manifested. The technology aboard human vessels is entirely conventional, Dr. Vasquez continued, displaying detailed schematics that had been freely shared with other civilizations. The difference lies in the consciousness operating that technology. A human crew that has achieved complete mastery over their own internal states creates a field of harmony that extends to their ship and equipment. This field effect was perhaps the most mysterious aspect of human capabilities. Individual humans who achieved self-mastery seemed to project a zone of stability that affected everything around them. Technology functioned more efficiently, natural phenomena became less chaotic, and even other conscious beings experienced greater internal peace in their presence.
When such individuals worked together, the effect amplified exponentially.
A ship's crew that had all achieved personal mastery created a collective field of harmony that could apparently neutralize even Category 10 ion storms. The storms remained as energetic as ever, but they existed in a different dimensional space than the harmonized consciousness of the human crew.
Commander Icarus of the Hegemony Fleet stood to address the assembly.
Dr. Vasquez, you're describing capabilities that would revolutionize galactic civilization.
If consciousness can indeed determine how physical forces affect it, why haven't other species discovered this principle? The question touched on something Dr. Vasquez had spent years studying.
Commander, most galactic civilizations achieved technological solutions to survival challenges very early in their development. You learn to reshape your environment to suit your needs, rather than reshaping yourselves to harmonize with environmental challenges. She displayed comparative evolutionary data showing how different species had developed. Most had achieved stable planetary conditions, abundant resources, and conflict-free societies within a few thousand years of achieving sentience. They had then focused on external technological development, creating increasingly sophisticated tools to manipulate their environment.
Humans had taken a different path by necessity.
Earth's hostile conditions had forced them to develop internal technologies first, the ability to maintain perfect psychological function under extreme stress, to achieve states of consciousness that external circumstances couldn't disturb, to master themselves so completely that external mastery became almost trivial by comparison.
The principle we've discovered is actually quite simple, Dr. Vasquez continued. External forces can only affect those aspects of a being that remain in internal conflict.
eliminate internal division, achieve perfect self-mastery, and external circumstances lose their power to cause harm.
Applied to space travel, this meant that a crew operating in perfect internal harmony could pass through any external chaos unaffected. Applied to technology, it meant that systems operated by such consciousness functioned with an efficiency that seemed to violate thermodynamics. Applied to existence itself, it suggested that consciousness was the fundamental force that determined how all other forces manifested. Dr. Yula of the Silicon Collective resonated with harmonic frequencies that indicated deep processing of complex concepts. Dr. Vasquez, if what you're describing is accurate, it suggests that consciousness evolution is more important than technological evolution.
This contradicts the development path of every known civilization except humanity. Perhaps, Dr. Vasquez replied, or perhaps it explains why humanity has achieved capabilities that seem impossible to civilizations with far more advanced technology. We focused on mastering the consciousness that operates the technology, rather than just advancing the technology itself.
The implications were profound.
If consciousness really was the key to ultimate mastery of physical reality, then every galactic civilization had been pursuing development in the wrong direction. They had built increasingly sophisticated external tools while leaving their consciousness relatively primitive, creating a fundamental limitation on what those tools could achieve. Humans had taken the opposite approach, developing consciousness to levels that allowed them to achieve harmony with fundamental forces. Their technology was often simpler than that of other civilizations, but it was operated by awareness that existed in perfect balance with natural law. The question before us, Dr. Vasquez concluded, is whether other species can learn to achieve similar states of consciousness. Theoretical analysis suggests it should be possible, but it would require a fundamental reorientation of development priorities. The challenge was enormous. Most galactic civilizations had spent millennia developing external capabilities while largely ignoring internal development. They would need to learn principles of consciousness mastery that humans had been forced to develop through survival necessity. Some species were already beginning to experiment with human-taught meditation techniques, psychological integration practices, and consciousness development protocols. Early results were promising but limited. It seemed that achieving the level of internal mastery necessary for reality manipulation required either evolutionary pressure similar to what humans had experienced, or conscious dedication to self-development that few individuals in comfortable civilizations were willing to undertake. As the symposium continued, a new understanding began to emerge among the assembled delegates. Humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their technology or their space travel capabilities, but their discovery that consciousness itself was the ultimate force in the universe. They had learned that the one who destroys their weak self can never be destroyed by others because they have eliminated everything in themselves that external forces could act upon. This principle, when fully realized, made beings effectively immortal in ways that transcended physical longevity. They existed in a state of such perfect internal harmony that external chaos simply couldn't touch them. They could walk through ion storms, survive impossible challenges, and achieve goals that seemed beyond the reach of conventional physics. The universe, it appeared, was not a mechanical system operating according to fixed laws, but a responsive matrix that reflected the consciousness observing it. Those who achieved perfect self-mastery discovered that reality itself became their ally, supporting their intentions and allowing them to accomplish what seemed impossible to divided consciousness. As the symposium concluded, representatives from dozens of civilizations departed with a new understanding of their own development priorities. Technology alone would never grant them the capabilities they had witnessed in humans. Only by achieving the same level of consciousness mastery could they hope to access the deeper laws of reality that humans had discovered through necessity and applied through wisdom. Somewhere in the depths of space, human ships continued their impossible journeys through ion storms and other hazards, carried by crews who had learned the universe's greatest secret, that external mastery was merely the reflection of internal mastery, and that consciousness properly developed could harmonize with any force in creation. They had become living proof that the one who conquers themselves can never be conquered by anything else, no matter what form that challenge might take in the infinite possibilities of existence.